Have you ever known anyone that lived to be 100 years old? Well, I've known two people that lived to be 100 years old, and they were both married to each other. Bevis and Hilda McCord. The old man, when I was about 11 years old, he bought a piece of land that had been sitting untouched for some years from the wife of the guy who had owned it. And next door was a piece of land owned by Bevis, and him and Hilda lived there in their house. The the first I think the first I ever became aware of Bevis was me and the old man were back in the bottom, the creek bottom, kind of toward the back here, and we were back there doing something with either the weed eater or the chainsaw. We were making some noise back there. The bottom was grown up like 12-foot tall grass, weeds, horse weeds, whatever, just real tall stuff. I think we drove down through there with the pickup. So we were back there making some noise. Again, I was like 11, maybe 12. And all of a sudden, through the 12-foot tall weeds, here comes a Cadillac busting out of the weeds. You know, there's just things, sometimes you see things you wouldn't expect. You wouldn't expect to be back in the bushes in a kind of a hard to get to place that's all grown up and see a Cadillac come busting out of the weeds. You just wouldn't expect that. So he pulls up, he stops, gets out, and he's gonna check it, who we are, what's going on. So he had heard us from his house. He had heard a noise back there. He might have known somebody bought the place, but I'm not sure. It was not his land. But I think he kind of thought in his mind that it was his land. Probably for many years when it was sitting, growing up, not being anything done with it. I think he got to thinking he did own it. He kind of had that mentality. So he got out of his car and he's kind of checking us out. So he gave me, he got out his billfold and he gave me a $5 bill. And he said something like, "Here, you'll buy yourself a box of shells, for squirrel hunting," or something like that. And he talked a little bit, and then he got back in his olive drab Cadillac and drove away. That Cadillac, I don't know what model it was, but it was probably like about a 1970. That kind of looks like it, best I can tell. Late 60s, early 70s, something like that. It was, one of those big tank of a car. It was a hard top. And Bevis was basically legally blind. I mean, he couldn't see shit. But he still drove. I doubt he had a driver's license. I don't think he could have passed any eye test whatsoever. I don't know what year he would have last had an eye test at the driver's license branch. But I would guess he just said to hell with it and just kept driving. And he probably didn't have a license or insurance. I wouldn't think. I mean, he couldn't see anything. Hardly at all. I mean, he had to be legally blind. And he drove like crazy. He would go down this road, this rock road at the time. He would be flying down that road. I mean, just like a bat out of hell. You would think if you're blind and you're driving, you would go slow. But not him. Just flying down through there. Probably, again, his mentality was, everybody just better get out of my damn way because I own this road. How he didn't kill anybody, I don't know. Years later, after I had a driver's license, we're talking, what would that be, six or so years, 7 years later, I was going north on the Hayesville Bridge across the White River, and he was driving south, and I met him in the middle of that bridge. He was actually driving his wife's car. I don't think the Cadillac was probably going so good. Hilda had her own car. I think Hilda was more blind than he was. And I'm driving north, and I see him coming towards me on the bridge, and he had his head down like low, and his hand like holding his forehead, like he's adjusting his face to get his best view of the road. I think they were going into Hayesville to the store maybe, or something like that. And he started to come across the center line, and he suddenly realized and jerked it back. I don't know if he even knew it was me, but I remember that visual. It was him and Hilda. He was driving. Wouldn't that be something? Get hit head on by this guy who was, the neighbor. Had no business driving whatsoever. So according to my math here, I think he would have been about 85, 86 when I first met him. Something close to that. Well, Bevis, by the way, when after he left, that first time I met him, when he gave me the $5, the old man said, "You know why I gave you that $5, right?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, he's going to be asking you to do stuff for him. He's just buttering you up." Well, that may have been true in this case. It'd be nice if people could just be giving and generous without it being a plot or a plan to get something in return. Well, Bevis, I don't think he ever called the house. Maybe he tried or something, I don't know. But he would put out the word in the neighborhood, the farm neighborhood over there. He would just put out the word that he wanted to talk to me. And somehow it would get around and somebody would say, "Oh, hey, Bevis said he wants you to stop by." So I would go over there. Now, again, he was very, he couldn't see good. So I would knock on the screen door. He would open the inner door. And we would have then the screen door between us. And we would be like 2 feet apart. And he'd open the door, and every time this would happen, we'd be standing there, and he couldn't tell who I was. And he'd say, "Who are you?" And I'd say, "It's me, Bevis." And he'd go, "Oh, come in. Yes, come on in. Have a seat here. Yes, of course, yes. Ah, yes, have a seat there. Yeah, very good. Oh, yeah, that's good. So he was always glad that I showed up. but he never did know who the hell I was until I said so. And I don't remember what the first thing was he had me do. Something in his yard, I think. I remember I tilled the garden one time. It was probably the last time they did any gardening. I think I tilled the garden a little bit. He had some like old fence wire or an old fence post kind of left over in his backyard that was like grown into the trees and stuff. That might have been another stop. Just every once in a while, he would have me stop there because he had something he wanted me to do. And I think mostly what it was, I think Bevis had been like, he'd owned a lot of land throughout his life. I don't know what his life was. I wish I had been more, asked more questions. Maybe he'd have told me some things. He wasn't the easiest guy to talk to. He kind of had a fart in his brain about himself or something like that. He sort of had a I'm the bull of the woods mentality, like he's the big man on campus. He had kind of a fantasy about himself that he was someone of great importance and weight in social politics or something. He was very political. He was very much Republican. And yeah, I think the reason he wanted me to come over there had more to do with him getting a chance to be the boss man. He had farms, he had owned a lot of land, and he had had people work for him throughout his life, I guess. I don't know how many. So he was sort of used to being the boss man. And I guess he hadn't had that for a long time. So then I come along, there's a kid next door basically, and this is his chance to be once again the boss man. So the things he had me come over and do really weren't much of anything. I remember one time his birthday was in June, and so was mine. So one time, Mom took me over there, and we took him some of my birthday cake. I remember that one time, and they seemed thrilled about that. One of the times early on, one of the first times he got me to do anything over there, some chore, he gave me a $20 bill. And I remember my mom said one time, she said, well, that's nice that he's not one of these old tightwads that here, do some work for me. Here, I'll give you $2, like some of these old timers. Well, it turns out, I think that was the last time he gave me anything for anything. I think he thought that's enough. I think he thought, I got him buttered up, we're good. So for the next 7 years or so, I think that was the last time he was going to pay me anything. Which is, I've never been someone that's like, oh, you got to pay me. I've never been like that. Which is probably why I've been ripped off so much. Because I don't stand up for myself. But in that regard. So anyways, and people pick up on that. Anybody who's sort of a user, predatory type guy, they sort of sense that quickly. Bevis and Hilda, I always heard they had a lot of money. I heard she had more money than him. I don't know how they made money or what. I just don't know their life history, which I wish I'd thought to sit down and say, hey, what did you guys do? What was life like? Where'd you grow up? I would guess they inherited stuff. I would guess he bought land and sold it at a higher price, made money farming. I would guess he made money all the ways you make money out in the country like that over the years. It's kind of a weird thing. I could kind of kick myself thinking back. I knew people that were in, World War II and various things, and I was always a history kid. I loved history, and I always gravitated towards older people. It's weird that the generations younger than me, they sort of have this I hate older people thing going on. I was just the opposite. I was like, I'd rather spend time with people older than me than people my age when I was a kid. I just felt like, well, they have more sense and whatever. I found out that's not true. Being older doesn't make you smarter or better, ethical, or anything like that. A lot of people get older and go to the grave with their heads way up their asses. But, when I was a kid, I guess I assumed better. I hoped for better. But I wish I had been a bit of an interviewer when I was a kid, but I didn't talk much. I didn't pry much. I wish I had that mentality to talk to older people about their life history. The good, the bad, the ugly. And usually it's bad and ugly with humans, I hate to say. But anyways, I hate that I missed those opportunities. But again, Bevis was hard to talk to. He had this sort of grumpy, I'm the wise old man and you're just a kid, and kind of insulting, and yeah, that whole crazy delusions of grandeur. he he kind of had that going on a little bit. I had heard that he got in some legal trouble some years before. Something about an insurance scam. I don't know if he was selling phony insurance or maybe it's all wrong. I don't know, but that's what I always heard, that he was trying to sell some kind of insurance to local farmers and maybe he didn't have a license. I don't know what happened, but nobody got into details. I heard he got in some legal trouble, and there was something about, some people said, well, they were going to put him in prison, but he was just so old, they thought, well, we want him, we'll let him go home. I guess they didn't know he'd live to be 100. So he would get me over there, put the word out over the next handful of years that he wanted me to stop by to do something. One of the times he, I think I had a driver's license by this point. So he gets me over there to kind of clean up the old steel fence post. He had steel fence posts that were rotted in half. Now, I don't know how much use you can get out of a half-rotten steel fence post and some of this old fence wire. And I hauled it off. Back then, we would throw stuff in washouts. Probably not a good idea, but that's kind of what we did. When you had a washout under a fence or something. So, he told me, he said, if you take this old wire into the junkyard in there, they'll give you a little bit of money for that. Now, I think he was serious. But I don't know how he thought that was true. He had to know better. You're not going to haul rusty old wire to the scrapyard. They ain't going to pay you nothing. They might let you throw it away for free, but they ain't going to pay you nothing. What else? They were, again, I always heard they were quite wealthy, probably had the first dollar ever made, those kind of old people. They didn't have any kids. Now, I had heard that Bevis had screwed around on Hilda at some point in, the past, and that he had a grown son living in Indianapolis that he would go up there and see every once in a while. I have no idea anything about that man, how old he lived or what have you. I'm guessing Bevis outlived him. I don't know. He got me over there one day. He put the word out, and he said, so I go over, I put the word out, knock on the door. Who are you? Oh, come in, come in. Well, what he had in mind was I had a driver's license at this point, and he said my feet get cold in the winter, and I want to put some coal in my stove in the basement, warm up the floor. He said, now you go up there to the coal mine, and you drive down there in the pit, and you pick up the coal on the edges that they can't get with the loader, and you can pick that up for free. They won't charge you for it. He said, you go up there and get me a pickup load of coal. And I said, yeah, okay. No talk about money or payment or nothing like that. So I told the old man about this, and he said, yeah, I'll go up there with you. So me and the old man, we drive up there one day. This is in the summer. And I don't know where we went, but it was, several miles on the back roads to get up to this coal mine. And you stop at the office there, the scale house, and you say, hey, can we go down the pit, pick up some coal? Yeah, go ahead. So we go down the pit, and we're picking up chunks of coal on the edge. The loader's running. It's a little bit dangerous. Coal mines are a dangerous place. You're driving down the pit. There's heavy machinery. I don't know why they actually let people go down there. Maybe they don't anymore. I mean, to me, it's just the liability. Why would you risk it? So we're throwing on chunks of coal, and we kind of got what there was to get. It's not an endless supply. It's the stuff that's on the edge of the seam where the loader, some of it falls off in the rocks. Now, the people that work there, they could pick it up, but they generally don't mess with it. Well, we threw on a pretty good jag of coal. The bed was not level. This was a full-size F-150 pickup. It was not level, but it kind of covered the bottom of the bed, and it was chunks. Now, there's littler pieces. If you want to sit there and pick up, little bitty pieces, you can do that too. But we threw on a pretty good little mess of coal. It was not a tiny amount. It was something. And then the old man said, well, that's good enough. He said, we got everything you can grab here. So we drove back to the old man's place, and the old man wanted to go hang out with one of his drinking buddies, so he said, you go on over there to Bevis, you unload the coal. I'm going to go hang out with this other guy. Okay. So I go over to Bevis's, I pull in the driveway, and I knock on the door, and oh yeah, good. So he goes down in the basement to open the window, and I'm standing there by the truck waiting to see how he wants to do this. And he walks out of the house and down the driveway, and he looks over the tailgate of the pickup. And I'm standing there by the bed, and he's standing behind the tailgate. And he looks over into the bed of the truck. Now, it's possible he didn't even see most of it because he's so damn blind. But anyways, he looks in there and then he looks at me and he says, I thought I told you to get me a load of coal. And I said, well, we picked up what they had there, for free, the free stuff. Yeah. Well, I told you to get me a load of coal. And I'm like, so now I'm in trouble. I'm on, And he's just glaring at me. And he says, you go back up there and you get me a load of coal. And I said, yeah, okay, yeah, all right. And he's just looking at me like, buddy, what are you trying to pull, Now, this is completely free. It's free coal. He said, go down in the pit and get the free coal. They'll let you pick it up for free. Now, if you wanted a whole heaping load of coal for sure, you can go in the coal yard and throw it on, or they'll scoop it on with a loader, and whatever. And then you drive on the scale and they weigh it and you pay them whatever the going price is for coal. You can do that all day long if you want to buy it. But he didn't want to buy it. He wanted it for free. Well, we got all they had for free in the pit at that moment. But he seemed to think I was, he acted like I was trying to rip him off, but there was no rip off because he wasn't paying for it anyway. So he told me to back up to the window and throw it in the house. So I back up to the window. Now, I was, a teenage kid. What was I? 16, 17, something like that. I don't know. Now, what I should have done is just, when he went back in the house, I should have just gotten truck and left. And then took the coal to somebody else and just gave it to them. That's what I should have done. That's what I would do today. But I was just a kid, deer in the headlights. You ain't expecting to get scolded for doing somebody a favor, a favor of driving many miles through the countryside, going in a dirty old coal mine and throwing a coal, But he was mad about it. He's mad at me. Well, I threw it off through the window into his basement cellar area. And then I got done. I guess I went up to the door to tell him I was done. And then he said, now you go down there in the basement. And you tidy that up. Throw that all up in a corner. It's kind of scattered all over the floor. And I said, okay. So I go down there. And I toss it up in the corner so it ain't scattered all over the floor in that room. And then I walk back upstairs, and all the while he's sitting at the kitchen table. So I come back up, and he's sitting there, and he's just kind of grinning at me, just a grin, I don't remember what we said at that point, or how it was when I left, or what was said. But anyways, I left. Now, I did at least have enough gumption to know that I was not going to go back up there and get him any more coal. And he never brought it up. He never brought it up. He never said, hey, when you going to get that coal? I never heard about it anymore. And I don't think he even used the coal I brought. I don't remember ever driving past his house and seeing that he had the stove. You can usually tell when somebody's burning coal on their stove. It makes a mess. I don't remember ever seeing that. So I don't even know if he had a coal stove. I don't know what the hell he was doing. Maybe he didn't even have a stove for it. Who knows? But, anyways, that was quite a turn off. You know, I didn't say anything to him. I didn't even complain about it to other people. It's just one of those things you sort of, when somebody's pricklish and dicklish to you like that, you sort of file it away. You know, you just put it back here, and it just sits back there. And maybe a few years down the road, you start thinking about it, and it starts to make you mad, you know, a little bit. It accumulates, you know. You just put that in the file cabinet. But one thing I've learned throughout my childhood, my teenage years, and so on, working for farmers and pretty much anyone, is that older people screw younger people. It's just automatic. It's an automatic screw over where, you know, we're just going to use you and maybe not be too nice about it. We ain't going to pay you much of anything. And that's just how we're going to get by. And that's true of all human history. Older people use and abuse and screw over younger people. With rare exception. There are exceptions. There are a few people that ain't like that. But by and large, older people screw younger people to get them to do work for free, do shit jobs for free, get stuff for free, or send the young people to get shot and mangled and blown up in a war so that the old people can keep their stuff, you know. Old people screw younger people. And that's not an anti-older people statement. That's just my lesson I've learned about human nature. And it doesn't have to be that way, especially when the person, you know, has money to pay that younger person. If they're gonna, you know, like for a farmer, if you're working for a farmer, if that kid's gonna show up and do a man's work, well, then pay him like a man. Don't pay him $4 an hour and treat him like shit on top of it. And then show up in church on Sunday and act like you're a good Christian. You know, I got to be an older teenager, early 20s. I remember at some point it came up that he was going to sell his Cadillac. He just wasn't driving it. Well, hell, he couldn't see anymore. And the car was, you know, what it was an older car. I don't think you could get much money out of one of those back then. I mean, maybe now, if it's in good shape, who knows. But I mentioned something about buying it when I was sitting there with him in his lawn chair. We'd sit in the driveway in lawn chairs or kind of in his garage, which has been torn down now. And I remember it made him mad that I asked about maybe buying his car that he was wanting to sell. And he's like, "You don't need no car like that." You know? It offended him that I, being a kid, would buy his old Cadillac because in his mind, that's the car of kings, and you don't think no damn boy gonna drive around a Cadillac. You gotta, you know. I think that's what it was. His mentality, it offended him to think that, you know, a guy in his teens or 20s would buy a Cadillac. But again, I don't think that car could have been worth a heck of a lot of money. I wouldn't think. I mean, maybe now it might be if it was still around. You know, maybe it's like a collector's thing at this point. But Back then, I don't think so. But he had that mentality of, again, I'm the old bull of the woods, and you're just a damn boy, and you know, kind of had that attitude. Another story I'd heard about Bevis was something he had went to a, I don't know if it was a political event or the place to vote or something, but somebody said that years before he had got in some kind of an argument about politics or something, and he'd pulled a knife on a guy or something like that. I don't know. You know, you hear things and sometimes it ain't true, so you know. But he did have this air about him that he was some kind of a man of political clout in the county or the state or something like that. I don't. He kind of, I think he had a little fantasy about himself there. Well, when I was probably, I'm gonna guess I was about 20 or so at this point. I guess he decided he needed new shingles on his house, and I guess being a tightwad, maybe he went with the cheapest outfit he could. And I seen him tearing that roof off. It was like two or three young guys, and nobody really a boss being there. I just seen it from a distance. Well, these guys, they tore off the shingles, but they didn't put any back on. And then something or another happened, and they got shingles put back on, or somebody did, or another crew. But they didn't do a very good job, and they didn't do anything around the chimney. So there was a gap between the roof shingles and the chimney. I don't know if they tore the flashing off, but I got called over there one day to get on the roof because there was water coming in the upstairs. Well, I went up there on the roof and I seen this gap around there, but I mean it's like an inch or so. I mean, you can't just take a caulking gun and fix that. That's you got to work on that. That's gonna take some work, you know. So he got ripped off on his roof, and I even told the old man. I said, well, ain't that something? I said somebody ripped off old Bevis, you know. Finally ripped him off, you know. But so I got up there, and he had lightning rods on his house, like 4 foot tall lightning rods, 3 foot tall maybe. Well, these guys that did the roof, they just tore that off, and I found a lightning rod just laying in the yard. They just threw it off the roof and it was laying in the yard. So I come over, and I think the old man was with me, and I got on the roof and I'm looking at this. Well, I mean, you got to hire some roofers, you know, to fix all this shit. So, but I did find that lightning rod. Well, he knew his lightning rods were missing somehow. He knew they were not on the roof. Maybe somebody told him. I don't know. So we were looking at it, and we were there, and you know, I mean, I wasn't gonna like jump on and fix the roof. But you know, you need somebody that has all the stuff. You need to hire an actual crew and pay them something, you know. So I took the lightning rod that I found in the yard and I put it in the garage. I leaned it in a corner right by the door. And I thought he knew this. Well, a few days later, I stopped in there and we were sitting there right inside the door of the of the garage, and the lightning rod's leaning in the corner. It was the only thing there. There wasn't like a lot of junk in there. The only thing in there, in that corner, with that lightning rod. And we were like sitting right there, like it was 5 feet away. You could see it. And we're sitting there, and we're chit-chatting a little bit, and all of a sudden he's like, "Hey, you took a lightning rod, didn't you?" He said, "Where? I want that back." And I pointed to the corner, and I said, "Bevis, it's leaning right there in the corner." And he goes, "Oh, okay. That's good, that's good." So he acted like I stole his lightning rod. The one guy on the whole planet that he knew personally that he could trust was me. But he's like, you know, I ripped him off on the coal. I stole his lightning rod. Yeah. People get a lot of weird ideas. But another time he got me over there, his antenna, he had a TV antenna, and I think it was just a pole. I don't think it was a tower thing. I can't remember. Well, I guess inside the house when he would turn the rotor, the antenna wouldn't turn. I guess it was so old and rusty, maybe it was just froze up. I don't know. And he couldn't see the TV anyway, but he would listen to it. He would turn on baseball games and just listen to the baseball game like it was a radio. So he was having trouble getting his baseball games on TV. So he got me over there, and we're standing there in the yard. He wanted me to climb up that pole like a squirrel and see what's going on with that box up there. He wanted me to hang onto that telephone pole, I guess with one hand, and I don't know, work magic. I don't know what he wanted me to do. I mean, I don't know how to work on TV antennas. That's not my thing. So, and I'm sure paid me nothing, but I couldn't fix it anyway. What was I going to do? So I've run into that before with old tightwad geezers who have asked me to climb dangerous things because they just can't bring themselves to actually pay somebody whose job it is to work on something. So they'll risk me falling off something and breaking my neck so that they don't have to spend $100, even though they're near the end of their life and they're loaded with money. I've run into that before many times. I will be telling some of those stories, those other stories as well sometime. Well, I didn't climb his TV antenna. I'd climb it and do what? I don't know. What magic am I going to do? Climb up there and look at the box, look at it. Well, what good will that do? You need to get a technician out there whose job it is to work on antennas and have them fix it. So there was that. There was a handful of things like that. Later on, when I was into my 20s, they hired a woman that I knew to come over, I don't know, once a week or what it was, to kind of tidy up the house and that kind of thing. And then, of course, they didn't want to pay her anything. I guess they did pay her something, but I don't know what it was. But they tried to get as much out of you for as little as possible. So they would then volunteer her to take them to the store. Like I need a haircut. Take me to get a haircut. But they wouldn't pay her to drive all the way to town to the barber. Or take us to the grocery store. We got to do some shopping. But they wouldn't pay her, So they get you in there to do this thing and pay you as little as possible, but then they volunteer you to do 10 other things that they're not going to pay you for. That's the kind of shit they would pull. And again, these are well-off people. These were not poor people squeaking by. I don't know how rich they were, but they had money. For people pushing 100 who ain't going to need money for too much longer, they were doing real good, I'm sure. But they didn't want to share that money with anybody else who would do any work for them. You see? It's that kind of shit. Well, one story that the woman told me was this. They go to the grocery store, and Hilda is looking at bananas. They had bananas that were, and look at them, I'm sure it was a blur, because she couldn't see shit either. So she's looking at bananas. They had two prices of bananas. They had fresh, new bananas that were 10 cents higher in price, and some slightly older bananas that were 10 cents cheaper. And they had a sticker on them, like maybe a barcode, I don't know. And she seen this, and she wanted to pull the stickers off of the old bananas and pull the stickers off the new bananas and switch them. Put the old banana sticker on the new bananas so that she could get the new bananas 10 cents cheaper for a bundle or whatever it was. And the woman was like, no. I'm not letting you switch those stickers. We're not doing that. But can you imagine? This was very close to the end of their life. Like, they were near about 100 at this point. They were probably within 2 or 3 years of being dead. They were a century old at this point. Plenty of money. And they want to stand there in a store and switch stickers on bananas to save 10 cents. It's that kind of shit. Now, they were sort of needing to go to the nursing home because they were so fucking blind that they could have been sitting there eating bars of rat poison and they wouldn't have known it. They couldn't see shit. So Hilda would try to cook, and she'd throw shit in there that wasn't the right, she'd grab a handful of something and throw it in there, and it had no purpose in that, she'd throw the wrong stuff in the wrong mixing bowl, and just weird shit, because they couldn't see. They couldn't see anymore. They both had their minds like they'd always had, but they just couldn't see anymore. So for a very short time, they hired a woman. Somebody put them onto this, I guess. They said, look, y'all can't be here by yourself. I mean, you could fall down. You can't see what you're eating anymore. So they hired a woman. I didn't know this woman. I don't know who it was. They hired a woman to just kind of live there, like be a live-in caretaker, maid, type of deal. Cook for them and maybe see to them they took the right pills and, whatever they were needing to do, find their socks, this sort of thing. It was either that or go to the nursing home because they couldn't really live there anymore because it was just too dangerous for them. And, of course, they didn't want to pay the woman. If you live in somebody's house like that, you got to watch TV. You got to live your own life. You got to cook your own food. You got to sleep. You know what I mean? You have your own life. You're living there with them most of the time. But you got your own life. You got to do your own thing. And they're like, well, we ain't paying nobody to sit around here and watch TV. You better be out and working. What? You can't have somebody at your house working 24 hours a day doing chores. They got to sleep and eat and relax. But that's how they were. They were like, yeah, we ain't paying somebody to sit around, even though they needed the babysitter, you know? I mean, people that just, man, I've seen that with so many people in my life. I've known older people who go to the grave pinching every penny. No generosity whatsoever, even to the people that are going way out of their way to help them. And these are people that got money. They're loaded. I've known so many people that had plenty of money. And they are definitely toward the end of their life very much. And they're still scheming and scamming and plotting how they're going to save a dime here and there. I mean, what? It's like an illness. Well, Bevis, I never told Bevis off. I was always friendly and, respectful, even though he was a dick to me. I never told him off. I never nothing. Um, we took him things. I remember one time we took him some fish. We took him things. We took him. It's like you do with your neighbor. You take him. I don't know, something from the garden, or something you baked at home. Whatever. We did that a little bit here and there. Now Hilda, I don't know. Hilda never said much. I mean, she'd say something here and there, but sort of like, "Oh, it sure is a sunny day," or something like that. But she didn't say much. She would just smile. Maybe she didn't know what the hell was going on half the time. I don't know. But Bevis was he was kind of like sandpaper. He could be abrasive and insulting, and kind of gruff and stern with you for no reason. For no reason. But I never pushed back. I never. But I did. I did sort of. As time went on, I was kind of like, you hear the stories and you experience the behavior a little bit. And I had some good conversations with Bev. Some relaxing. You stop in the evening and you're sitting there, and but it was not good quality stuff because he was wired the way he was wired, and that's unfortunate. When you're a young guy and you know somebody that old, there's a lot of things they could tell you and teach you and advice they could give you. But he kind of had this again, this bull of the woods pricklish mentality, and that's unfortunately that spoils the experience. As time went on, I kind of got a little bit, the coal thing. The woman who was cleaning for them, I guess Bevis said to her, ask Shane if he would mow the yard. So she brought it up to me, and I was kind of like, yeah, I could. Now, the problem with mowing the yard was this. Again, I didn't have any problem mowing that yard. They had an old snapper riding mower. Fine. Fine, I'll stop. I'll mow the yard every week, whatever you want. The problem is Bevis was probably going to use that as a way to then tie me up for the rest of the day with nonsensical bullshit and not pay me anything and maybe be a pricklish dick about it. So I was sort of turned off, and I told the woman, I said, "Well, look, I don't mind mowing it, but I don't want to, you know, I just want to show up, mow the yard, and then, and then that's it." So I don't know what she told him or how she said it, but she told me that she told Bevis, "Look, Shane will come over and mow the yard, but he doesn't want to be bothered." Something like that. Like, he doesn't mind coming over and mowing the yard, but you know he doesn't want to be hassled or some. I don't know what word she used, but she said something like that. Well, I guess that's ate into him. Like, well, I guess he's like, the hell with that boy. So I would end up mowing the yard for free, and that's fine. I would have mowed the yard for free, but I never heard no more about it. I don't know who mowed it. Uh, I don't know how that worked out or what happened. I do remember the yard got a little bushy. So that's kind of how people are. They want to kind of run rough over you, but then they want you to do shit for them, and then run rough over you, and when you stand up for yourself a little bit, they're like, "Well, screw you. I can get along without you. If you're gonna be like that, well, I'm not the guy with the problem. I'm coming over and helping you for free here. So, yeah, Bevis McCord. Bevis and Hilda. They both lived to be 100 years old. Now, I'll tell you a little story. When I was, before I had a driver's license, I was maybe 14. And the old man got drunk over there. And he stupidly tried to drive up the hill in the woods with his pickup. And I told him not to do it. And that dummy, I stood there and watched him. He drove up the hill, spun out, and just the truck came back down the hill and got stuck. It was comical to see that truck go kind of roaring up that hill and just keep roaring, come to a stop, and just roaring, and then it was going back down the hill backwards. And it ran into a log, and he couldn't go back and he couldn't go forward. So now he was hung up. Well, we didn't have a phone, or I don't think we had electricity or anything over there. So he wanted to call one of the farmer drinking buddies in the area to come over with his tractor, pull him out. I don't know why we didn't have we had a tractor. Maybe the old man just thought it wasn't enough tractor to get on that hill with. I don't know what we had a tractor, but we probably didn't have enough log chain to get all the way up that hill to the flat part. So the old man says, "Why don't you go over to Bevis's and call that guy?" And I said, "Why don't you go over? You're the one who hung up the truck." He said, "God darn it, just go over and do it." And I was like, I don't really want to go over and knock on the door and ask to use their phone. It's kind of getting toward dark. He said, "Just go do it." So he wanted to stand there and drink beer. He hung up the truck, and he wanted to stand there and drink beer while I walked down the county road to Bevis's house and knocked on the door. So I stupidly, again, I'm everybody's pushover. So I walk over. Well, I knocked on the door, and we go through that deal. "Oh, come on in. What's the matter? What?" I said, "Can I use your phone?" "Yeah," he says. "But what do you need it? What do you need the phone for?" He's real nosy. I said, "Oh, I just need to call somebody." "Yeah, but what's going on?" And then I said, "Well, the old man hung up the pickup truck." "Oh, wow, yeah. Well, why didn't you just tell me?" I said, "Well, I need to call somebody." He told me to call somebody to see if we could get a tractor pulled out. So it was in the evening, about dark. And Hilda was in her bathrobe. We're standing there in the kitchen. And I guess she just, being old like that, she didn't know that her bathrobe, the top was sort of open. You know what I mean? Now, I mean, it wasn't like full on open, but it was open enough. Now I'm kind of a historian, but I'm here to tell you one thing I don't need to see is titties that were around long before Teddy Roosevelt died. You know what I'm saying? That's not a good deal. No offense to you gals out there, but and no offense to Teddy Roosevelt either. Century-old titties is not. I don't need to see that. I don't need that in my mind. I don't need that imagery. So she's just standing there smiling, and I'm trying to use the phone. Oh boy, but there's not many people. Well, I guess if you work in a nursing home, but there's not too many people that can say they've seen titties from the turn of the century. You know what I'm saying? That were around when Teddy Roosevelt was still around. You know that there's not many people can say that these days. I'm one of the few. So, but it's something I wish I didn't. I'd rather just not have seen anything. You know what I mean? Because that's a bad deal. That's bad. I mean, that's a massive boner killer. 100-year-old titties that'll kill your boner for a long time.